Theatre Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
We all sing together in one breath. Oh, Merry Christmas, Maggie Thatcher. We all celebrate today, 'cause it's one day closer to your death.
From New York City, this is Theatre Talk. I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
And I'm the producer, Susan Haskins.
Terrific new musical on Broadway, Billy Elliot at the Imperial Theater, based on the very popular and wonderful movie. And we are very delighted to have with us tonight the man who wrote the movie, who wrote the book to the musical, and the lyrics. Lee Hall, welcome to Theatre Talk.
Hello.
And congratulations on the success of what's become for you, I guess, a kind of cottage industry of Billy Elliot.
It's very odd. It's very odd to be here, I guess, because it was about 13 years since I wrote the film script. And it just keeps going on and on.
Was it a story that you began with, a short story, or was it the script first?
No, I just, I had this image. I was in the bath one day. I had this image of a little boy in a tutu running along a back street in the northeast where I grew up. And I thought, oh my God, this is a story. And I sat down and started working it out, and I immediately saw it as a film.
So you started writing it as dialogue, not as a not as a work of prose initially.
No. It was. I guess I created a load of images because it's a very visual. When I got the landscape of it, it sort of started to write itself, and I realised it would be set during the strike, which was a big part of my growing up.
The miners' strike, we should say.
The miners' strike, yeah.
In England in the 1980s.
Yeah, 1984. It was a huge. It was as close as we came to a civil war, because there were literally people down the road fighting every day about whether they were going to keep these pits open or not. And it was such a vivid part of my growing up. And it seemed that it was a neat story, because it happened over a year, and that seemed a neat envelope to construct this other story inside.
Why the image of a ballet dancer? I mean, were you a dancer yourself as a kid? Were you interested in dance?
No, not at all. I think it was it was a very clear image about being different and artistic aspiration. I was always interested in reading and writing and things like that, and was always kind of pilloried by the people around me. Nobody understood what on earth that was. Everybody was a puff if you did that, and it was very...
Even if you're a writer?
Oh, yeah, especially if you were a writer. I mean, it was kind of, it was all just the other, They were scared of it and didn't like it. And so I wanted to kind of write about that. I thought it was an interesting thing, because it was a sort of a bit of a struggle being just interested in reading.
But I guess dancing more...
Dancing a little more visual, a little more dramatic than if the kid just, is in the library. I don't think you'd have a musical on Broadway that's got an advance of $15 million if the kid wanted to be a librarian. I wanted to tell us a little bit more, though, about your growing up in this period. You grew up in Newcastle.
Yeah.
How important was the trade union movement to your community when you were growing up?
It was kind of incredibly dominant. Where I grew up, everybody that I knew voted for the Labour Party. Any man who worked would be part of the trade union. It was kind of, you couldn't think outside that box.
Was your father in the trade union?
Weirdly he wasn't, but he'd worked in the shipyards, and then he worked for himself being a house painter. So there wasn't a union of that, but had there been, he would have been in it. But my grandfather was a big trade unionist. He was what they call the shop steward who ran the trade union for his factory. So it was just, but it wasn't remarkable because everybody did the same. I only really remarked on it when I kind of left and realised how strange it was. It was kind of like another country, really.
Now, how did you get out of there?
I got out of there. I think I was very lucky because none of our family had gone to university, had an education, or nobody was interested in arts at all. They didn't even play musical instruments. And during the 60s and 70s, a lot of educated, I guess, hippies of that generation came to the Northeast to kind of like liberate people like me, I suppose. And so at school was a very, very rich atmosphere of doing music and drama and putting on plays, and it was part also of a political education of the kids. So that art and politics were absolutely the same thing in education. So I just got really interested through school.
And you put that there.
And but it was very strange, you know, that the resistance from most of the other kids, from
the
other
parents?
adults. Yeah, and my parents just didn't understand. They thought it was just weird. Why am I reading all these books? Why am I interested in plays? They couldn't understand it at all. And it wasn't until, you know, more recently that I think they just thought there's no way somebody from this background is ever going to be able to do it as a writer.
So, in the end of Billy Elliot, the movie, the family comes to resolution of embracing and appreciating. Do you think that could have happened? Really? That they would, when they embrace and appreciate the
Well, it happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
That was my story. Yeah, I guess I kind of educated my parents in a way, but I mean, and you know,
there's the wonderful movie moment in the movie when Billy gets into the ballet and the father comes running up over the hill, jumping around. Was there that kind of moment for you with your parents where they realized our son is a writer and he's written something that is astonishing to us?
I suppose it was a bit earlier than that, because it's a sort of fantasy autobiography. I mean, none of it is literally true, but all of it is emotionally true.
Yeah.
And I decided when I was about 17 that I needed to do something with this interest, and because the sort of thought was I would go and work with my dad, like most people did, and I decided that I wanted to go to university, so I thought, pick Cambridge, that's a good university. So
not a bad choice.
and that is, so my ballet school was Cambridge University, and I kind of, you know, and the day I got in was that moment, really, because they couldn't quite believe it. I didn't quite believe that.
So wait, let me ask you that, because you've got the other wonderful scene in Billy Elliot when the letter arrives from the Royal Ballet, and it sort of sits, I think it sits on the table, right, for a while. They're sort of afraid to open it. Did that happen to you with your parents when the acceptance letter came in from Cambridge?
Yeah. I guess that's possibly the most autobiographical bit of it. But yeah.
My favorite character in Billy Elliot, though, is the broken down old ballet teacher, you know, who just gives everything to this point. Did you have someone like that in your life, a teacher who?
I didn't have teachers who were so broken down.
Well, no, I speak as a broken down teacher myself. But you know, that she was so invested and became his mother in a sense to get him through.
Yeah, I think I was really privileged because I didn't have just one. There were 2 or 3 people who really took an interest in me, way beyond their job as a teacher, and. You know, I used to go to their home. They used to, you know, give me things to read, take me to see things. It was.
So this character was a distillation. Then.
A distillation of all those things and all those people. And but I think it's kind of unthinkable now that that would happen because there's all this kind of separating education from life.
Isn't
and all
that a shame?
thing.
Yeah.
And I was just so lucky that it was a sort of freer time.
I think teachers would be reluctant to take any kid, you know, home or off the premises of the school now or something like that.
Yeah, no, I certainly wouldn't happen.
I want to touch on the political dimension of Billy Elliot because it is, you know, a fiercely anti-Thatcher, anti-conservative government statement, very much pro-trade union. However, though, looking back, coming from that world of the trade union movement, the argument can be made that the trade unions had a real stranglehold, a lock on the economy of Great Britain, and that power was abused, and that they had to be broken. Do you hold any truck with that argument? Do you see Thatcher's point of view at all, that the trade union movement was abusive, was too powerful, and had to be stopped?
No.
Even that now you're a rich and famous screenwriter and living in a lovely apartment in London, you have no sympathy with the Conservatives.
No, I think they completely misunderstood what the problems were. I think what happened was that there was an inevitable shift from a industrial economy that's happened everywhere to a service economy that was happening because of what's now called globalization. They didn't say that at the time, but the management of that, which clearly things had to change, was just they threw out the baby with the bathwater and they attacked the wrong thing. And I think in Britain we really suffer the consequences now. It's only really now when it's really bitten in, and I think even the rhetoric of Thatcher seems kind of soft compared to even what our government sometimes do now.
Well, Stephen Daldry told us now that area is, has the highest heroin rate in the country.
These former areas that were coal mining places.
The Thatcher's disregard for the welfare of the people who are going to be involved in this has borne fruit of.
Oh no, it's been devastating.
Yeah.
And at the time, you see, I came from not only did the unions were looking after their own workers, that political understanding. For instance, there was the cooperative movement, which were in the northeast. So you went to get your groceries at a shop that you partly owned,
right.
And your groceries were cheaper, and you got free things because the profits were brought back. For instance, and there are many, many other ways in which the union movement was part of a bigger political movement, which was about self-help and protection of, and it was that culture and that political ideology that Thatcher needed to smash. So you could have rampant consumerism. Everybody's individual. Nobody's helping themselves in this way. And
look where we are.
And look where we are. And so, it seems weirdly so timely that this.
Yeah.
In my lifetime, it was about the moment where actually that came to be a physical battle. I mean, in the play we show that.
Yeah, you've got the police
riots.
and the miners and a riot.
And this was a daily thing that happened over a year. That. People's houses were smashed up, people were arrested, people just doing their job, or in fact not doing their job, people going on strike, were literally beaten up.
But what was in the mind of the police? Just that was their job too.
Well, that was the job, and that during the Thatcher moment, that we were living in sort of two countries. The North, the industrial heartland, was a completely different country. At that time, there were 3 million unemployed people, which was a massive percentage, biggest since the 30s in England, and but it was at the same time as what we call the yuppies in London, and the growth of the stock market, and all of the things.
The city was exploding.
Yeah, exactly. So and great wealth and prosperity. For some in the South. And so it was a very, very polarised environment. But the political agenda, as I've said, was ideological, Milton Friedman, monetarist,
yep.
and that, but it physically meant a battle on your doorstep. It had this manifestation, which why it became a very interesting thing to write about. But also, I think that it doesn't. Hopefully, its political allegiance and analysis is relatively clear. But I problematise the nature of that society that I grew up in because it was homophobic, macho, small-minded, all these other things. So it's not that culture was
perfect and blissful.
Yeah, indeed, and that's as a dramatist, that's.
Right, the tension there.
As our now President Obama said, and he was criticized for this, that people, when they're frustrated, become bitter and they cling to things like, he said, guns and macho things, but that people in their despair will cling to these
Yeah, absolutely.
But what's interesting, you could have written a piece, though, which was really turning your back on this community of homophobic, narrow-minded people. You could have put them down, but that's not what Billy Elliot's about. It's about these people, my little interpretation, recognizing that their community, their way of life is over, but this boy is going to go on to something they can't even imagine, but he will carry with him the good things about that community.
I think that weirdly became clearer as time's gone on. That was a theme about it. The theme of loss and the theme of this big sort of economic change. Because when we were at the movie, there were still pits. Pits is the British word for mines. And by the time we came around to making the musical, they literally shut them all. And I think there used to be 300,000 people directly going underground in 1984. Now there are less than 1,000 in the whole of Britain. And so that's a profound shift in such a small country, in a country that had depended on the natural resources of coal for, well, since the Industrial Revolution. And in such a short space of time. But that's been a process that's been happening for over the 20 years, and it accelerated just as we were writing.
And you end the musical and the movie very differently, and that explains it.
So it became clearer what it was about.
Interesting.
And why we had all been getting our hands dirty in this thing, and I think the theme of loss, on many levels,
resonates more now. I want to elevate this discussion. Elton John. He's the composer of Billy Elliot. I'm always curious because I know people who've written musicals with Elton before, and working with Elton is kind of an interesting thing because Elton is often not anywhere near you when you're writing things, since he's in Vegas and touring and doing this, then the other thing. What's it like to write a musical with a worldwide pop superstar who's not, holed up in a hotel room with you, banging out songs every day?
Well, it was blissful, really, because I think what's great about him is that he's absolutely intuitive. He just understands what he needs to do, and what we did was talk a lot around what it could be. And when because I was very cagey about it, because I made the film, I thought of it as a film, and I didn't understand quite how it would work on a stage. And when we talked about it, I realized that what informs so much of his music was popular traditions that weren't necessarily just rock and roll, that he uses an awful lot. A lot of his, he says, if you want to write a good ballad, write a hymn. And when I realized that subconsciously, when he writes, he does draw on all these different traditions of music, which have an awfully long history. And I realized that he would be able to write a score which used the indigenous music of this community. So he just, because he's got such an absolute Catholic range of taste, and so he just knows about folk music. He knows about the Wesleyan hymnal tradition. He knows about, and so he's got this at his fingertips without even considering it. So when I realised he could do that, it became very simple to understand what the musical should be, and hopefully it's in a tradition that we work in from the theatre workshop with Joan Littlewood, who probably is best known here for Oh What a Lovely War.
We talked about Stephen Daldry when he was on, that working class tradition of theatre, everyman's theatre. Everyman's
theatre, but using the cultural objects of those communities that you're representing. So and that's what we do in Billy Elliot. That there's a folk song, and there's hymnal songs, there's the political songs, and even in those traditions to have the rock and roll pub band kind of thing. And we do a couple of those things, but they're all kind of integrated formally and thematically in a way that helped me say what I was trying to say.
Yes, and you didn't try to stick to the scenario of the film on a scene-by-scene basis. You really broke it open with the music and completely reconceived how all the emotional moments would be realized.
Yeah, it was a great opportunity because you can. What's great about theatre is that you can do more than one thing at a time, and you know, and I think where we've been most successful is when we have many things happening at a time, narratively, emotionally, choreographically, yeah.
And puppets.
And puppets.
Now, when you were working with Elton, though, would he send you a theme and then you'd write the lyrics, or would you sketch out a song, do the lyrics, and then send them, via fax or email to him?
The one thing he was insistent on is that we write it in order. And
the order of the way the songs will fall in the show.
Which I thought was very smart. And he really only writes he can only write if he's got a lyric. And sometimes he doesn't like a lyric, but he doesn't ask you to change it. He just says, we're not going to do that one.
What happens if you like your lyric, though?
But I think he's got very good taste. But I would write a thing, and then I would fax it to him if he was in Atlanta, where we wrote the first half when he was in Atlanta. And so I'd fax it in the morning, and come evening, he would ring me up and say, listen to this, and he would play it down the phone. And it was a surreal and fantastic experience to sort of get such an immediate feedback on. So it didn't really matter that there was the distance between us. And the second half we wrote in London, it was the same thing, really. I'd come in the morning with a song, a lyric, and then he would wait until he understood what to do. He writes incredibly fast when he does it, but it's an awful long time to just get to the point where he feels that he knows what to do. Now,
if he can say, I don't like this lyric, we're not going to do that, can you say to Elton John, not crazy about that tune, we're not going to do that? Does it work both ways?
Well, there were 2 or 3 songs that didn't fit into the drama of it. It's quite long as it is. But I think what was brilliant is that I think we had a very good rapport, and we intuitively understood each other. And he completely got whatever I was trying to do. I think it's because Billy Elliot is as much his story as it is mine. Yeah. I mean,
he was the misfit kid who was an artist, who was gay and had to get out of, I believe he grew up in a working class environment as well.
And his Royal Ballet School was the Royal College of Music, and he used to go there when he was a teenager just to then get these special lessons. And so he just understood it, So it was a really, from my point of view, easy relationship. Because we were both singing from the same hymn sheet. Yeah.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, but I do want to touch on a play that you've written. It's at the National Theatre in London. I hope we'll see it here, called The Pitmen Painters. I was fortunate enough to see it in London. It's a terrific play. Can you just tell us what that's about?
I discovered there were a group of miners who, in the 1930s, hired the professor of art from the local university in Newcastle to teach them art history and painting. And so they used to go down the mines during the day, and once a week at night they would have this guy come in and teach them about art. And they discovered they were quite good. And within a couple of years, they were exhibiting their work in London. They were collected by some of the most important collectors of modern art at the time. And it's really about that they decided that they wouldn't become professional, and they could have easily become professional. And they
remain minors.
They remain minors till either they died in the job or they retired. And it's about class and art and politics and the meaning of art and importantly, I suppose, who art is for. So there's loads and loads of themes which are very similar. It's
Sounds
like a
great.
prequel to Billy Elliot.
It seems to me that for you, art is what can transcend class.
I think it can. I'm a great believer in the transformative nature of art.
Yes, but art can transcend all things, really, not just class.
Yeah, but I think it transform. It can transform. It can properly change.
Yes.
And it's a metaphor for politics as well as being the politics of transformation. Yeah. I'm worried about transcending that it leaves class behind, because I think it's important that you break down those restrictive structures that we live under and you change them. And it's really exciting to be in America at this moment because of all that.
Yes, indeed. All right, we've got to wrap it up?
Yep.
All right, Lee Hall, Billy Elliot, Lee Hall's movie and now musical on Broadway. It's a terrific show. Don't miss it at the Imperial Theater. Great talking to you. Thanks for being our guest tonight.
Thank you for coming to America.
And 1, and 2, and 3, and 4.